So now we're going to get into a workflow where we're utilizing a primary control scan, as we're calling it. So on our project, what we did is at the very beginning, we took a Leica P50 scanner, which is about the longest range, the highest accuracy, the absolute best of the best of the laser scanning world. And we scanned all of the existing conditions, the surrounding buildings, the surrounding structures, everything that had geometry and surfaces that weren't going to move through the life of our project, and then we tied that scan back to our primary control points on the sidewalks on top of where we were scanning. So in theory, it was the highest accuracy, the least amount of potential error because we're bringing it right in off of primary control. So in theory, it should have been the most accurate possible laser scan of the existing environment around our project. And so what we did with that scan is we are utilizing it as what we're calling a primary control scan. So with that, we're going to kind of get into the basics of how we go and utilize that. So for right now, I've got a previous deck scan. So this is all registered. I'm happy. So at this point, right, nothing that needs to change. I would say, well, you'd want to get your deck scan, your scan, whatever it is, registered and as perfect as possible, and at which point you then lock it and then bring in your primary control scan. So I'll double check, make sure I'm happy with this, at which case I'll then bring it back and we'll go import the primary control scan. All right, so at this point I've run my cloud to cloud, checked my registration, everything looks good. So at which point I want to lock everything and not let it move again. So just like your applied control, if you have a control file, whether it's black and white targets, control points on the deck, whatever, if you leave this all unlocked and as you tie it into that primary control scan, if it's unlocked, it's going to try to distribute any error throughout this data set, which, depending on the circumstances, may not be bad. But for me, just to try and help troubleshoot or figure out what's going on if I'm having issues, I like to always lock these, apply the control, whether it's control scan, control points, and then which point I can either accept it or I can go about diagnosing and trying to figure out how to make it better. So it's locked. So I've got the same point cloud, nothing's different. Basically, it's got good coverage of the surrounding buildings, surrounding environment. So now I'm going to import my control scan. So to do so, you're going to go into kind of this projects and storage tab. So we're going to select the scan or the data set that I've been. So it's this guy. And I want to merge in my primary control scan. So I'm going to hit OK. So it's going to close it. And now it's going to copy paste this 21 gigs of my control scan into this deck scan example. So this will go faster as long as you got a nice fast hard drive that you're running off of. Usually it's about a minute, so we'll bring it back once it's done. Alright, so it finished up. So now we'll go close this, go file open again. If you notice, this demo scan now has the additional 31 scans of the control scan imported in. So your control scan, whatever you merge, is always going to be left alone. It's just going to more or less copy every last part and piece of data into the current project. So open this guy up. So now you'll notice we also have a second sitemap. So this second sitemap is going to contain the project control and the project control scans. So like I said, it is basically a mirror copy of the control scan in its state that it's left off. So at which point all my setups are locked. I imported this all in a pre-registered state, so you may notice that these links may look a little funky or may not be the most practical of links. So just know that when you pre-registered import, it's just going to create the shortest links possible, or for whatever reason what it thinks is the simplest. It's not actually moving anything or adjusting, it's just simply linking them, so it's a singular bundle. So at this point though, we are ready to drag it and merge it into our deck scan. So to do that, go to your sitemap and you're just going to simply left click and then drag it into the other sitemap. So now I can go ahead and delete these sitemaps. So now I've got the one sitemap that has all of my information. And so you may have also noticed that we now have a new UCS created. So I'm going to activate that, which shouldn't change much because it's already in that orientation. So now I will basically just kind of drag and drop my test demo scan in the approximate location. So just kind of using some of the geometry as a reference. And now, kind of just like every other link you create, it's just doing some visual alignment. And depending on the scan and the environment and the overlap, it's never going to hurt to have more scans or more links tying back into your control scan, as long as there's good overlap. So in my case, this scan right here is on top of the Holiday Inn, and because this deck is about 200 foot up off the ground, this is going to be my best chance to make sure it's accurate. So to do that, simply select my standard control scan, hold control, select another deck scan that's kind of on the perimeter edge that's got good overlap, and now just go through your visual alignment tools. And same process as all the others. So just find a good corner, and then you're going to drag and drop it kind of out as far as you can where you got good overlap. Hold Alt, slow it down, and now check my elevation. So you notice, right, quite a ways off because of the height difference of where we scanned this deck. So just using a couple good surfaces as reference and just kind of fine tune it, get it close. All right, happy, join and optimize. So overlap is not the greatest, but my average error between the two scans is very, very tight. So you'll notice as the higher you go, like in my circumstance with our high-rise, the higher we build, the less overlap we get. So that's why I always recommend to add more links back into this data set. So if you noticed on this kind of deck scan, I got 3 good setups with great overlap that's overlooking the surrounding environment. So those are the links, or those are the setups that I can tie back into to get the best results possible. So just going to go through and add links to each one of these. And at this point, they should be very, very close. And if they are not, and you notice there's any changes, it's off, it's just not coming in correctly, that is a very good indicator that you might have some error as it's kind of wrapping around or moving throughout that data set you're tying into. If it's a very, very tight, accurate registration, every one of these links I create and tie in should basically already come spot on. If there was any error, which there's always going to be a tiny bit, it's never going to be truly, truly perfect, just kind of the limitations of the scanners. Any error you do have, though, is going to basically kind of distribute itself across the links we create as we tie back into that control scan. So once again, really good overlap, or good overlap, but really good tight errors. And then we'll do our last setup. And so a lot of this, if you're going to use this control scan kind of method and workflow, you just have to understand when you're scanning in the field to always get good setups with good overlap that match your control scan. So that's going to be the key to this workflow, to ensure you can always get consistent and accurate results. So now, basically I got this one control scan, this one P50 setup that I'm linking into 3 of our kind of adjacent or perimeter scans with the good overlap and good overlooking data. This is just what works well for my project and my data set. So once again, if I go to my bundle cloud just to kind of show you the 3D space, right? So here's the Holiday Inn, top of the building, and so that's why I'm pretty much only using this one for this circumstance. Simply put, because it's got the best overlap and most similar kind of angles and line of sight. You can go back through and always add a few more to try and help lock in to make sure you don't have any weird rotations or issues with horizontal or vertical movement. But just know, like, as you tie in your current scan, your current data set into a primary control scan data set, after you create that first link, if all the other links you're creating are not coming in, like when you do that visual alignment, and they just look skewed, right? So like they just don't quite come in perfectly on the first try or without having to do anything, that's a very good indicator you might have some errors in your data set that you might want to go back and try to tighten up a little bit more. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, you can leave this data set unlocked, at which point it's going to kind of move and adjust all of these links to kind of distribute and best fit all of these links that we're using and tying back into the primary control scan. I like to lock it before I do that, just to ensure or to know if and where I potentially have some error. So, but in this case, like I said, my scan should be very, very close. Shouldn't have much to change, but I can always go back and add a few more scans to tie into just to get that feel good, to make sure that everything's looking good and I'm confident in my results. So once again, a little bit less overlap because the setup I tied into was ground level, so it's 200-foot difference in elevation, but either way, I still get great results. And so at this point, what I like to do, so if you notice, right, the 4 links that I just created are the only links that are unlocked, at which point I will come in, right click, and go run cloud to cloud, and it's going to run cloud to cloud just on the links that are unlocked. Just as kind of the last, make sure the software is doing as best it can to tie in and kind of average potentially any errors you have. So now I would lock it, and now I'd go into kind of the QC mode. On this deck scan, we've always had control, whether it's from a trade, concrete, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, or our own field engineers. So the big reason and why we've had so much success with this kind of control scan workflow is it allows us to be a third party a third party survey or verification of control, because I'm tying into this control scan, which was set up at the beginning of the project, just like primary control for the surveyors is set up. And as we go up, I can always back check into the points that field engineers are shooting in, that trades are shooting in, you name it. It's just a good means and methods to kind of back check and verify what they got. So because my UCS is active, I now have coordinates, right, that are tied. So I got northern eastern elevations. So now if I want, I can come in here and then I can start to do some spot checks on not only our control but the trades, just to make sure that this point cloud, this data set, is coming in accurately, and I can trust it, not only what I'm doing with the scanner but the trades and our field engineers, because the life cycle of our project, 26 stories, we probably found 5 or 6 control bus from trades as well as our own internal FEs, due to a multitude of reasons, but it's always a good third-party check with this control scan. So at which point you can come in here and find your control point, pull a measurement, you can verify these XYZ coordinates, or you can come in and just simply do some spot checks with kind of that, what is this tool called? Pick points. And so then you can come in here. All right, if you like it, you're happy, you can move on to the next one. You can also always, whether you're in a bundle cloud view or setup cloud view, you can just come in here and say it's a PT cable that you needed to lay out, or a bunch of sleeves that you're going to start checking XYZ coordinates from. If you don't have a model or didn't want to bring it as a model, you could do all those pick points, right click, and you can export out the XYZ coordinates, and then you can start to back check that way. So one tool, one option that you have. So now we got our deck scan, it's tied into our control scan, and it's verified. We're happy with the links. We're ready to move on to basically isolating this deck scan from our control scan, because we don't want this primary control, all of these setups, right, that 21 gigs in my case, I don't want all of that data to be exported. I don't want to have to manually clean up all of that additional data, because it's a P50 and some of these setups have 100 million points or more at a single setup. It's a lot of data that can really slow down the process. So what we have to do is we more or less have to create a mirror copy of this UCS tool, or this UCS, so that we can delete out all of our control scans at once. And that just takes seconds versus trying to just draw a fence and then deleting all of your points outside of that fence or inside, whatever you want to do. So that's what we'll get into next, and a few options that we have to go about that.